Hi, I'm Allison, a third year student at SUNY College of Optometry.
Oh, hi, I'm Dr. Marina Sue, and I'm really happy to be here with you today, Allison, and hopefully we can have a nice conversation today.
Yeah, I'm just going to start off with asking you a few questions. Why did you choose optometry above any other healthcare profession?
Yeah, so I guess when anyone ever asks me about this question, it's really, why did I even choose optometry at all, actually? So I'm not sure if you knew this, but I was actually not a science major and I wasn't destined to become an optometrist from the age of 4. I actually had two pivotal points when I look back on my education. And the first was an internship opportunity, and the second was a class that I took in college. So with the internship opportunity, it was actually at an international law firm, and I was going to go to juvenile delinquency and family law sector. So I graduated with psychology and legal studies as a dual major, and so this is part of that process of becoming, going to law school. And then when I was at that law firm in the summertime, I was really fortunate to be connected with a partner of the law firm. And the main reason why we were is because both of us prefer to speak English fluently. And so we had a lot of informal conversations. And it kind of led me to see that while my interest and intent in going into law was there, it was part of a really deep-rooted system with a lot of systemic issues that I think he was trying to warn me that to be prepared for it because I wasn't going to really, change the system per se. Jokes on me, healthcare is just as deep-rooted with a lot of systemic issues, but I am a lot more hopeful for it because of the fact of all the different dynamics that play into healthcare. My second turning point was my class that I took junior year of college. I took it in juvenile delinquency, and it's an immersive class. So for the semester, we were tasked with developing a curriculum for reading and writing for what we call boys, because they were in juvenile camps. In California, where I went to school, if you were incarcerated before the age of 18, you were sent to juvenile camps because they had school programs. It's not called jail for under 18. And so I was working with these boys over a semester. And while I was working with them, I saw that they were complaining of weird vision issues, meaning, words were jumping around on a page or they were seeing the words doubling. Now we know, vision deficiency, vision, perception, but I didn't know that at that time. So I went home and I looked into this, vision learning and words and double vision, and I found optometry. And that's how I fell into it, actually. So then I worked backwards. I said, I want to become an optometrist. Well, what can I do to get there? Which meant I had to still finish my undergraduate education in psychology and legal studies. Then I went back to the post-bac program to do all my science classes that I placed out of in high school. And then I had to take all my elective courses while working full time in a part-time job, all the, microbiology, anatomy. Um, so all of that to get into optometry school. And I'm really lucky actually that I found my vocation because it's a really good blend of, psychology with patient education, legal studies with legislative portion of optometry, teaching, education, healthcare science, everything. So that's kind of how I ended up choosing optometry. It's just be short. It's a little bit long, but there we go.
Can you talk about your optometry journey thus far?
Yeah. So, I think everyone's journey is unique. And it's really nice when you feature stories of different people because certain elements of certain people's stories can resonate with you. And I think part of the struggle was for me as I was falling into optometry, I didn't see a single person that was like me, but I saw elements of people that were similar to me. And so I was able to take captures of it and kind of just grow into my journey. And so I think my journey's only been 10, 11 years, so it's kind of short term for like the long term of our career. But within the 10, 11 years, I've already had like three big surprises, I would say. The first would be the motive practice that I'm in currently. The second would be the leadership opportunities that are available in a workplace that I didn't think was a thing. I thought just being a doctor was enough, right? I didn't know there was more you could do besides being a doctor. And then the third is the leadership opportunity to serve my profession. And that I didn't expect either. So I guess going back to the first one with the mode of practice, because I got into it with the juvenile delinquency and working with children in vision and learning, when I started school, my dream was to open a vision therapy practice, right? And do vision therapy on one end, and then like have an education learning tutoring center next door to it. And clearly, you know where I work now. I work in an ODMD practice, ocular disease, no vision therapy, no education center next door. So that is the first big surprise. And I think what kind of got me there was that I didn't want to only see a certain type of patient population. And as I was in the real world, I realized that patients come in for you to fix their eye problem. They don't say, I have glaucoma, or I need scleral lenses, or I have CI and I need vision therapy. They say, I can't see, my eyes hurt. Fix it. And then it's our job to either learn the information that we need to do to learn, to give them what they need, or connect them with a resource or our colleagues or a network to get them the care that they need. And so I just felt to be more efficient in delivering care, for me to learn as much as I could and I was comfortable with and I was trained with, and then everything else that I couldn't do, I would rely on my colleagues to help me with it. And that's kind of why I've stayed in this kind of mode of practice where I could do essentially primary eye care, although it is a little bit secondary and tertiary. It is really the comprehensive eye care. And I think that's the first surprise for me. And the really cool thing about optometry too, as well, is that, we live in a healthcare system where it's really allopathic, which means you have a problem and then let's fix it, right? You go to a doctor, you have a problem and you fix it. But with optometry, you have an ability to be preventive, right? And so you're preventive, it's more so, I see you're going to have a problem. And the reason why I know this is because I've seen people with your problem. So we have a choice now to kind of work together to mitigate it. And I think that's kind of a really cool part that people don't see about ocular disease. They see it as we have to always fix problems, but there's a lot of opportunity to do preventive medicine, which is kind of why my intent of going to optometry was to begin with this, to prevent children from having these vision learning disorders that can impact their lives, going forward. So then my second surprise was just the leadership opportunity within the workplace. And I think, sometimes we think when we get hired for a job, we do the job, we go home, and that's it. But whichever mode of practice, whichever organization you work for, you are a valued part of that organization. So you have a choice. Your choice is I go to work, I come home, done, that's it. Or, I want to enjoy where I work because it's 40 hours a week. Why don't I give something back to my workplace so that I enjoy going to work every day if I'm going to have to spend this much time there? And that does take a little bit of extra effort. And it's not super easy or in our comfort zone. But I would encourage, if you have the opportunity to do so, to do it, even if it's just a little bit. And that's kind of how I fell into what I'm doing now. In terms of becoming a residency supervisor, my role in directing the optometry department, and also being the chief operating officer and assisting our CEO of the company in terms of running the organization. And the really good rewarding part of it is, part of my, I guess, drive to just keep doing what I do is because I want people to get the care that we can offer. And by training residents, it was a way for me to train doctors where they can go out and they can see thousands of patients too. So now my work of me seeing a patient one at a time is now exponential, right? And then my role in directing the optometrist is being able to kind of coach their other parts of themselves, right? Like everyone, we know we train clinically, but everybody is a whole person. There's certain aspects of certain individuals that can be extracted and coached and mentored, and all of a sudden you can do two things. You could be artsy and you could be a doctor. You could be creative and you could be a doctor, right? And that kind of helps me grow leaders, within the profession. And then the last bit is, being chief of operations. Now I have to communicate this to our support staff. Our support staff make our life go, right? You can't do what you do without help from other people. And that is on us as doctors to be able to work with them, because otherwise, if we're not training the people that work with us, then who is? Or if they are, then are they doing it the right way for the right patient care? So I guess those are kind of like the first two brackets. And then the third part, which I didn't think was going to happen, is a lot to happen. Usually it goes one and then the other, right? And then the other, right? You graduate school, you get a job, and then you figure out what you want to do, within your job, and then you give back to your profession. Mine was all squished within 10 to 11 years. I'm not quite sure if I would like choose to do it that way, but I think it just happened to be that way. And to keep me like not going crazy, I just kind of found similarities with it and used all of it to kind of make me successful in each of my individual positions. But my last big surprise was, being able to lead a profession. And currently this year, I'm serving as the president for NYSOA. And I didn't move to NYC, like New York City, to be here forever. It was supposed to be just for residency, but I kept getting drawn to New York City and New York State for various reasons. And I guess for the optometric community in New York to welcome me this way as a California transplant, and making me who I am today, in my profession, I guess this is my thank you give back to be able to serve, as a leader. And I'm very grateful for that opportunity. And I think organized optometry is just so important to not, lose sight of, because we're so busy in trying to schedule our own lives and what we do every day. It is really nice when you have volunteers and staff that believe in optometry to be able to move initiatives like forward that we would never be able to do on our own. And so giving my little part back. And then that's so far with my journey. Still getting started. So there's still a lot more to learn and still a lot more to grow. But hopefully that gives you an idea of it thus far.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's so inspiring to hear. What are some of the biggest challenges you have seen and or experienced as a millennial in the world of optometry?
It's a very loaded question. Yeah. So I guess the big one that everybody knows is just healthcare is changing, right? It is rapidly changing. I think medicine has gotten really strained. We know there's decreasing insurance reimbursements. We know there's costs of increased cost of goods, the workforce changes, especially with the pandemic, lots of bureaucracy, regulatory, lots of complexities of patient care and what they expect of patient care. That I think it's a moving target, and that moving target means that we also have to change so that we can be ahead of the moving target or be part of it, right? Be part of it so that we work with it together. And if we just let it kind of overwhelm us to the point of like, oh, we feel trapped, then we're not able to use our creativity, give or have our autonomy and have the ability to innovate, right? Because we have all these bigger forces around us. So I think that needs to be in the back of our mind. So we're always thinking about, yes, in our own little world, we can make it perfect, but really, how does this play in the big healthcare system? Or do we have to be doing things that may not be comfortable for us right now, but we need to? Otherwise, we're going to be in a place where we're not going to be happy with what we're doing in 10, 20 years. The other really cool thing is this is the first time we have 4 generations working in the same workplace, right? We have the boomers, we have Gen X, millennials, and Gen Zs. And in a few years, we maybe have 5 generations with Alpha. They're in their teenage years right now. They're gonna, if they don't go to college, they're gonna be in a workplace. So think about having a boomer working with an alpha, right? That's a very big span of generations. That's because our lifespans have gotten longer and our working life or our working abilities have been extended because of the flexibility and types of work we can do. And because it's a big span, there's going to be communication differences, right? Every generation says of the previous and of the future generations, oh, that generation this, that generation that. But I think for millennials, it positions us in a really important time that we're going to be the bridging generation. We're going to have to know how to speak to the boomers and the Gen Xers and how to connect them with the Gen Zs and Alpha so that we can be effective in doing things that are going to make a change. However, I know just looking at my, age cohorts is that we're kind of stuck waiting for our turn. And I think instead of just kind of waiting for it to be better or waiting for it to be this or waiting, it's time to be the change agent. It's time to do it, time to cultivate those skills. And I've been cultivating those skills over the years, just kind of figuring out how do I lead up a generation? How do I lead down to younger generations? And how do I lead across, my own generations? And I think that is kind of the biggest challenge because I don't know that we're all completely ready kind of to deal with it because it's a responsibility. But at the same time, I think it positions us very uniquely as millennials. And so we'll have to see, in the next 10, 15 years, it's going to be a very different dynamic of workplace, but it's very exciting because I think there's a lot of strengths of each generation. It's just figuring out how to make everyone communicate well, and not stereotype or roll their eyes whenever they hear certain things about certain generations.
What advice would you give to up and coming Gen Z leaders?
Advice. Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out advice for myself. But I think Gen Zers, from what I've seen, is that they grew up in an instant gratification world, right? In very digital world. So you really have a fear of missing out, of being like not included. And you've learned to do 50 million different things all at the same time. And that's how you absorb information. You collect all this information that way. But it can get very distracting if you don't know how to focus and prioritize. And I think that's kind of the biggest challenge when I watch. And I think one of the pieces I think of that would help you in terms of, because I grew up not digital and then became digital, was to slow down. Sometimes I find myself putting my phone away. I lose my phone on purpose, just for a moment to just focus on the people in front of me, right? Focus on people in the room with me. You'd be surprised at how much authentic and true information you can get from a one-on-one conversation or individual conversation that you will never get, no matter how you source the information from the outside world. So I think that's the first piece, is just to slow down a little bit and look at the people around you. I think my second thing is because, Gen Zers absorb so much information so very quickly, is to manage your perceived external stressors, which means what you think other people think of you. It happens anyways in terms of adulting, right? Like we all worry about everybody's thoughts a lot more in the teenage years, and then even more so in the 20s, the 30s and 40s and 50s start kind of care a little bit less. But honestly, like people are really absorbed in their own worlds to really care about that. And a lot of people, this kind of inhibits them from realizing their own potential. But because we live in a digital world, it seems like it's all around all the time, but it really isn't. And I think that's the whole thing about slowing down and just looking at the people around you. I came across this really good author, David Brooks. He also writes for the New York Times. And what stood out to me kind of when I was figuring out my life, my 20s, was resume virtues and eulogy virtues. And I know it's a little morbid to talk about death, but death is inevitable. But our society, Western society, and our academic trajectory is very focused on resume virtues, right? I want to do this so it's on my resume. I want to get this because I'm going to get the next big promotion, or I'm going to get this because this is all the different, clubs I belong to, all the different things I belong to. But when you attend a eulogy or attend a funeral and you hear eulogies, which I hope you haven't had yourself too much of, but when you attend those, when you hear about people talking about the individual, you hear about the person, right? Their values, what kind of person they are, how they were with their families and their friends or communities, what part they played in the social context of the world. And a lot of times by the time you figure out that you want to do that, you're already older and you've already passed all that time. So I think a really important part is to kind of just stay true to kind of the kind of person you want to be, and then making choices for your career and your career paths that align with that. So then if you work on that, that really talks about your moral character, your integrity, and those are the qualities that patients look for you in a doctor too. And I think that's something that we lose track of just because our system is created in a way where we're so focused on our achievements, but not so much how we grow our own individual spirit. And I think the last piece is data, right? Data is great. You have a lot of data, but be careful about how data is being used and how you're putting it out there, especially because you're a doctor. The digital world and marketing world, it's all algorithms, right? And they cultivate content to kind of gear you into thinking certain ways. And being a doctor, you have to think critically all the time. And that's part of the training, is to think critically. Don't just get the information and spit it out. You're supposed to think about it first, process it, and then give the information out before you say it. Otherwise, you're just going to be spewing incorrect information. With data, the more you click, the more you subscribe, the more you kind of lean into certain topics, you're going to bury yourself into a silo. And then the content is going to be kind of supporting your belief system. And then you kind of get sucked into that little path. Versus if you, again, slowing down, back out of it, try to talk to people who are not like you. Try to talk to people who disagree with you. Try to talk to people who anger you, or say things you're just completely offended by. And you'll find that when you've talked to those people, you realize that you yourself may have had some biases or have had some thought processes that were so I guess, constrained by who you were around and who you associate with. And as you get older, that makes it harder to break some of those communication barriers that I was talking about earlier with the whole generation gap. So I think that's kind of important, just to remember what kind of data you're putting out there and what kind of data you're bringing in. And if you find yourself having things that you're like, oh yeah, I agree, this is hilarious, this is great, then think, hold on a second, who's controlling that information coming to me? Should I be thinking differently about it? And I guess, a lot of studies have shown that Gen Zs and millennials are actually very similar. We have a lot of similar leadership traits. We want to be, valued. We want to have meaning and purpose. And a lot of us want to be change agents. So I think Gen Zers can really work with millennials in that sense, because that's where a lot of similarities lie. And I think instead of looking at two different generations, I do see some millennials roll their eyes at what Gen Zers do, and Gen Zers think about how millennials are oldies. There's actually a lot of commonalities that we can work together with that I've seen. So,
A bonus question for you. What is
sure.
your favorite 90s movie?
My favorite 90s movie. I think I had written Center Stage, and I had written that just because, growing up, so I used to take dance. I was in the pre-professional track for taking classical dance. I did classical training. I did ballet, tap, jazz, and then I did modern hip hop later on in my dancing career. And I had wanted to be a professional dancer while doing something, with my brain. But clearly I was not good enough to become a professional dancer, but I still really enjoy it. And I like that movie particular because it came out when I was in high school, and one of the star actors went to my dance school. And I looked at that and I said, wow, this is so cool. It could be a reality. So it featured people with that talent instead of casting celebrities or actors who didn't know how to dance in it. So yes, while the acting could have been a little bit improved, for me, it was a nerd moment because I was like, oh my gosh, they're featuring real ballerina dancers on screen. Since then, we've had a lot of movies. But I think it was that. And then the music was very 90s. And it was just like a fun, lighthearted thing. But part of it is it's funny because I wanted to go to Juilliard because of that. And so I was always dreamed about moving to New York City to go to Juilliard. And funny enough, I ended up in New York City, not because of dancing, but I think it kind of goes full circle. So I think that's why I picked that movie. It's not, a really thought-provoking or really, have you seen the movie yourself?
I haven't, no.
You haven't? Okay. Yeah. When you watch it, look for the dance. The dancing is pretty amazing, and the costumes and the music, but storyline, it's a cheesy rom-com. So
That's amazing. Thank you for joining me on this interview. It was so great to hear about your journey and where you are now.
thank you so much. And I'm excited to see where your journey is going to be, Allison. And you've done a lot already as a student. So I can only imagine, what's to come for you. And pretty soon you're going to be giving me advice on what to do and how to do it, so that I do a better job.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye.